Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 82. Today, we're largely going to be speaking about Borderlands 4, the current performance situation. We've done a lot of testing of the game at this point. We're going to be talking about the CEO's comments, optimization, of course, and whether or not we think that they'll be able to fix the game, and a quick update about the YouTube view situation as well. We think we're getting a little closer to the reasons behind what we're seeing. So let's get into it.
Well, Steve, mate.
Oh, you jumped in. Nice. Now that's good, actually. Good way to start the podcast, because I was like, what am I going to talk about?
Well, I didn't give you much. I just was an idiot, but hey, maybe that works.
No, that's good. That's good. It's probably a good breakup for this sort of start of the podcast, because, you know, we've been busy testing stuff as always and stuffing around in Borderlands 4, which we're going to be talking about and all that sort of thing. So
they're going to get your very serious intro that's going to then cut to that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, 100%. Right, so that'll be nice for people.
Yep.
Well, hopefully everyone enjoyed that. I was going to start off this podcast by a little update to the YouTube view situation, which we talked about last week. Lots of comments from people, sort of the expected comments. A lot of people sort of saying, oh, my algorithm has changed in one way or another, or, you know, people are on holiday, all the usual sort of things. I don't think any of those the reason for the YouTube views being lower across a lot of channels. I think we're sort of between the things that we've been looking at, LTT, I've been speaking to, I think it's Dan from LTT who's been looking into this, and a bunch of other channels. Obviously, there's lots of videos about this now on the platform. It seems that we've got pretty compelling evidence as to what specifically has caused the change, and it turns out it probably actually isn't YouTube. YouTube has said that they haven't made any changes to the way that they've been counting views, but they do remind people that, you know, ad blockers and things like that can impact views and may fluctuate as ad blockers change the way that they handle ad blocking on YouTube. And basically that seems to be the reason from what we've seen. So this can be dialed down to based on the impact that we're seeing in the stats and sort of looking at the times, the exact times that things like views have fallen off, views have changed, and all the things from the previous episode. That can be almost exactly lined up with a change that was made to the ad blockers themselves, and specifically the Easy Privacy list, which is part of EasyList. So if you use things like uBlock on Chrome, for example, which is a very popular ad blocker that people use, by default, it uses a lot of these lists, including EasyList and Easy Privacy, which are part of the same list. But essentially, Easy Privacy back on August 12th updated the list to block YouTube's view counting API. So already within, you know, the various URLs that it blocked was things related to ads, to actually stop you from seeing ads and all that sort of thing. But on that particular day, they changed that list to include another API, which appears to be the API that YouTube uses to count views, meaning that if you were using an ad blocker and you went to a video, you'd still see the video, but YouTube would not count a view because that API was being blocked. That change was reversed, or at least was temporarily reversed, a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago by the time this podcast comes out. And we've seen views in our latest videos being a little bit better. Not sure whether that was because of hot topics or not, but that change has been reversed temporarily because of, you know, internal issues. You know, actual human beings maintain these lists. They have reasons for making those changes. They go back and forth on why they add things in and why they remove things. Currently, the status is temporarily disabled as far as we can tell. So that is the current status. It appears to be an issue with ad blockers themselves, as opposed to YouTube. Now, this has obviously a number of different implications. The first one is the people maintaining those lists may decide to reverse the reversal. In other words, bring the API blocking back into their list. They've only said it's a temporary disabling of that at the moment, so they could change that decision again, which would go back to seeing the views that we've seen. And that's on them to decide. The whole point, I guess, of the Easy Privacy list is to block trackers and things like that. So this does block, view counters and things like that track you across the web. That's the whole point of that list. Whether or not the YouTube view counter should be included in that, that's on them. There's nothing we can really do about that. But at least that gives us sort of more of a concrete explanation. Because if it was YouTube, then they should probably make an update sort of saying to people that they'd changed the way that they count views. But if it's actually on the ad blockers, and I mean, the data was sort of hinting that way with things like desktop views being down where ad blockers are used, things like views being pretty much the same for people that were being served ads and revenue
Mhm.
being the same,
Mhm.
all points to this being sort of the factor. So, yeah, we don't know what will happen from here out. Maybe they will permanently keep this API out of the list, in which case then we'll be smooth sailing from here. Outside of that, though, we may have to, recommend to people to remove that from the easy privacy list, for example, if you wanted your favorite creators to have your view actually count towards the stats. That might be something to warn people about. And to be fair, in the list talking about some of these changes over on their GitHubs and stuff, there were people saying, I would like my views to be counted towards YouTube creators. I don't think that's really the goal of ad blockers. And other people sort of saying, this isn't a feature that is advertised when you install an ad blocker. Like, it blocks views, it blocks ads, but
Mhm.
you might want to know that it's doing other sorts of things. But I think we've talked about ad blockers in the past, and both of us are sort of pretty much on the same page. We don't really care if you use an ad blocker. That's just
Mhm.
part of using the internet these days. Ad blockers are great for a lot of websites that have really egregious and horrendous ads. And as creators, it's on us to sort of figure that out, right? Like,
Mhm.
we do other things to keep the channel going, whether that's, Patreon members or affiliate links or in-stream ads. In-stream ads are affected by view counts, so that's kind of a double whammy thing. But anyway, just wanted to know whether you had any further thoughts on people using ad blocking, or are you still pretty much on that sort of
Uh,
page on that front?
yeah, I've got no real issues with it. My opinion on that hasn't changed at all. It's a bit annoying the way that change had other consequences, but at the end of the day, it didn't really impact us too much. It was more, again, like we said last time, we weren't complaining about it or anything. It was more just confusing because we hadn't seen
Mm.
something like this before. And again, people commented saying, "Oh, well, the reason why the views are down is because tech's boring right now," or so on and so forth, which kind of missed either the point or the information we were giving last time, was the fact that we were humming along for a very long period of time at a very consistent level, and it wasn't like a gradual reduction in views. Like, people were like, "Oh, this is getting boring," or "This is repetitive," or "I'm no longer interested," which would say, people, if you're going to lose 40% of your viewership, that would happen over a period of at least months, unless you did something really outrageous that caused people
Mm.
to unsubscribe. But we went from we release a video every 2 to 3 days, and we went from doing over 100,000 views every single video, basically without fail, to some videos doing like 30 to 40,000 views in the first 1 to 2 days, which we haven't done on the channel for probably 5 years. So that was a bit odd. We're like, well, why did that video bomb? Did we mess up something with the thumbnail or title there? That's a bit odd. I guess that was an outlier. And then the next video does it. And then the next video does it. And then you start to wonder, what is our channel broken? And I guess that's the initial panic, is whether our channel has broken, because we've had issues like that in the past where things with our channel have gone wrong. But then we saw plenty of others reporting the same thing. So when it was a widespread issue, probably something to do with the YouTube platform. And then, yeah, as people started to investigate, we found out that it was more channels that probably get a lot more desktop viewers, which would be more like your tech channels. And then they probably have more people who use ad blocker. Whereas the people that are making, let's say, kids entertainment or stuff like that, where it's probably watched mostly on mobile devices and then probably predominantly TV, they saw very little impact. Though the percentage of desktop viewership, while smaller, they still saw that percentage shrink considerably. So
Mm. Yep.
it pointed to it being, a desktop problem. And the most likely thing there, based on everything we knew, was it was going to be something to do with ad block, whether that was YouTube actively trying to block those using ad block, or as it turns out, it was the ad blocker themselves blocking the views from counting as views. So a bit of a weird one. It's also a sensitive subject for YouTube to tackle, because they don't want to acknowledge publicly that there's a huge problem with ad blocking on the platform, because that's obviously bad for multiple different reasons. So they don't really want to talk about that and make it known to advertisers that a huge percentage of views on desktop didn't actually see their ad. So, they may not have paid for that view, but they still weren't served an ad. So while you can say that we have X amount of people on the platform daily, if a large percentage of those people can't be served ads, then it muddies the waters.
It's not good for their stats, right?
So that's why they want to be pretty bullish about talking about that sort of stuff and saying, no, it's business as usual, nothing's wrong. So anyway, but yeah, that's pretty much that. I did find it interesting. One of a YouTuber who I really like, the Spiffing Brit. Are you familiar with his stuff? He does like the best videos at times, like breaking YouTube algorithm and things like that.
I've seen a couple of his videos. I wouldn't say I'm like a regular viewer or anything.
I don't watch everything, but I've watched a good amount. I think his content's awesome. And he weighed in on this, so I was really interested to see what his thoughts were, because he's somewhat of a YouTube expert, let's say, and really dives into breaking things and working out how they ultimately work and stuff like that. And he basically said that it's not a thing. Like, it's just content creators losing their marbles a bit, freaking out over just seasonal changes, which I found really bizarre take from him, because he's usually really on it and gets these things right. And it seemed very disconnected from his normal approach. Wasn't really based on evidence and seemed to just discard the evidence that others had. Anyway, whatever. I don't know where he stands on it now, if he's made an updated video. I haven't seen that, if he has. I just found that a bit odd, the fact that he was sweeping under the rug, saying it's pretty much a non-issue, when it very clearly was an issue, and we now know what the issue was. And it was the ad blockers blocking the API from being able to count the views. So that's that.
It's still like I don't think we'll ever get a proper confirmation that is the actual reason. It's still we're still trying to align, essentially, like, oh, this change happened on this time and this change was reverted on this time, so we'll look at the impact that has on views. But it's sure. Pretty it seems pretty clear at this point that is what has happened. So yeah, I mean, I sort of understand how a creator would say, oh yeah, it's just seasonal changes and things, because often when there are, a creator says, oh, I'm seeing a large change in views or whatever, it's most of the time because of the content, not because of YouTube's changes to the algorithm and stuff like that. And YouTube is often right when they say, it's your audience or content, as opposed to changes to YouTube. August is summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. Less people are watching stuff. More people are outdoors doing fun stuff. And on top of that, sometimes you just make videos that don't resonate with people and aren't interesting. And so it's not the YouTube algorithm's fault that those videos don't perform well. It's because the content wasn't interesting.
I think specifically in our case, we're pretty good at looking into the numbers and working out what's going on. And we've been doing this for a decade. You and I can pretty well nail down the view count on a video before it goes out. Like, it's rare we get it really wrong. Like, as soon as we know what the thing is, and we see the title and the thumbnail, we can pretty much get a really good, like, we can pretty much get it down to a science of what the first hour will do, what the first 24 hours will do, and then what the first week will do, and then whether it'll do well on search beyond a certain point. And we're pretty good at gauging that kind of stuff. So when we have a video that we release, we expect that should do pretty comfortably 100,000 views. And then after 2 days, it's done 40. It's like, what the hell happened there? Like, that's unusual, let's say. And then to have that happen 3 times in a row, it ended up happening more than that. So, and we're very well aware of those seasonal changes. Like, you and I know when we're going to have a downturn in viewership and when things are going to cool off. And, and those who watch the channel a lot will see sort of the content change a bit through the seasons of what we do during different periods, partly because of those reasons, but also partly because of the time we have available to make content during, the release cycle. Obviously, it's more heavily focused on product reviews because we're trying to get them out. It's less about revisiting things or doing other content. So, the cycle's not anything new to us. We're, well established at this point. We know what's going on there. So this was just something to have, like, a 40, 50%, drop overnight, and then have that sustained for, I think it was about nearly 2 weeks in the end, is unusual. You don't usually see anything like that.
Yeah, that's right. So it'd be interesting to continue seeing, what's going to be happening with those ad blockers, whether the API will continue to be blocked. It's not clear what sort of other ramifications that can have beyond just trying to combat YouTube ads, for example, which I think is the main reason people would use those extensions. Is of course possible that if YouTube's not aware that you're viewing a video and that the views aren't counting, that will over time affect your recommendations on the platform. Uh, that is possible. We don't really
Mhm.
know because the change probably wasn't in effect for long enough to know whether that would have a long term effect. But essentially, yeah, YouTube does use some of those tracking things probably for nefarious purposes, but then some
Well,
of it is you
primarily.
yeah, primarily to serve you ads and stuff, but
Yep.
also for things like recommendations. That includes whether you're logged in or not logged in.
Yeah.
So over
Well,
time, if you're just basically seeing things and it's not going into any sort of recommendation algorithm, you're probably going to be stuck with some pretty bad stuff. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they want to keep you on platform, so that's their sort of secondary or part of the
yeah,
primary objective.
that's right. And yeah, if a change like that is affecting YouTube itself, like they're saying, oh yeah, views are down or whatever, I'm sure that they would actually probably change the API itself so that views are counted in some other way over time. So there's
Mhm.
always going to be that war. We've talked about the ad blocking war, the
Mhm.
changes YouTube's been trying to make to combat ad blocking. It's always going to be this sort of back and forth between the platform and the ad blockers to try and get stuff working. Because I think the reason they cited for blocking this in the first place was something about YouTube using things like the easy privacy list to see whether people are blocking ads or not. And so then they can show you those things like, oh, you're blocking ads. We're going to prevent you from using YouTube. Or they'll show you a little notification being like, go to YouTube Premium or something like that. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's what I suspected, that though they made the changes to counter the changes that YouTube made, because there was a period there where people with ad blockers thought YouTube was down. They
Mm,
because that
yep.
YouTube would load and be a blank page. That's because YouTube had detected that they were using ad block, so that was one of their countermeasures to get you to turn it off to then view YouTube. So I would say the ad blockers then made their changes so YouTube couldn't detect it. It just goes back and forth
Yeah,
basically.
that's
So I
right.
think that's
Yep.
what happened there.
Yep. Let's talk about Borderlands 4 now because we've spent most of the
Ooh,
last week testing this game. You've
yes.
done some performance benchmarking. I've made an optimization guide at this point. Um, I guess we'll kick off by saying 2K Games actually reached out to us after the optimization guide, which was a huge surprise. They actually reached out in a positive way and they seemed to be happy with the content that we were providing, actual advice to people playing Borderlands 4, which was, yeah, but like I said, pleasantly surprising because the content that you and I have both made wasn't exactly complementary to the way the game uh, was shipped to customers. Like I think in the first minute of my video, I sort of took a dump on the CEO a little bit with some of his pretty ridiculous comments that we might talk about. Said the game was poorly optimized, and you said very similar. So to get that email was nice and shows, I guess, 2K is looking into the feedback and that sort of thing. So
Well, yeah,
they're aware of.
it's not like you and I were the only people that dunked on them. And I think our criticism, it certainly wasn't overly harsh. We were more pointing out that, they're saying it's optimized, we're saying it's not optimized, and the level of performance we're seeing is unacceptable. We didn't exactly rake them over the coals or go to town on them about it. It's just you made
Mm,
note of it. I'm pretty sure, being in the gaming space, they're copying much harsher criticism from other corners of the internet. So yours was probably fine, Tim.
once these topics sort of get out there, a lot of people latch on to the sort of super negative angle, and it just goes into this cycle of, yeah, just hot takes dumping on stuff. And, some of it's warranted, but,
Yeah, but when it's handled so poorly, for sure, because there's so many ways they could have gone about this to get a much better outcome. But anyway, we'll get there, I'm sure.
yeah, they sort of fed the machine a little bit. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
our content, we're not really sort of suggesting to people buy or don't buy this game. We're just sort of presenting you the facts and figures about how it performs so that you can decide ultimately it's your choice whether you play Borderlands 4 or not. You now know how it performs, you know the sorts of things you can do to potentially get it performing better, and it's on you to decide, is that good enough for me or not? And you can buy or refund the game. I mean, obviously we saw lots of comments saying things like, this game's trash, don't buy it, don't, why are you advertising this game or whatever, which always happens on those sorts of videos, I guess. But I guess the reality on the other hand is that lots of people are actually playing the game as well. Like, it is a
Mhm.
very popular game based on Steam charts and things like that. So yeah, we're just giving people the information. So yeah, I don't think we'd ever go into that sort of, making crazy videos sort of saying like 2K games is the worst and Borderlands 4 is the worst and all that sort of thing. We'll just try stick to the sort of facts and stuff, throw a bit of our commentary in there. But yes, the game doesn't run well. The game's not well
Mm.
optimized. So that's not great. And I guess, should we talk about like the comments and stuff that we've seen, especially from Randy Pitchford on like Twitter/X about
Yeah,
like what is he doing? Like,
whatever you want to talk about.
yeah, so he's made a lot of comments, like a lot of comments, probably too many comments. First saying it's like optimal performance, saying you should code your own game engine if you don't think it's
Mhm,
running
mhm.
up to speed. Now, I think his latest thing is he's trying to like give personalized optimization advice to
I
people.
saw that in the
Yeah.
Discord. Yeah, to be clear, I've only read probably 5% of
Yeah,
the
saying, "Oh,
tweets
there's
that are
so
out.
much."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw one thread where he'd replied to his own reply, to his own reply, to his own reply, probably 20 times. I'm like, yeah, at the second reply, that's where I sort of dip out of that one. So,
Yeah.
but I've seen them posted all through the Harbor Unbox Discord and stuff, and I've glanced over a couple of them. And I did see that one, I think maybe this morning, and I chuckled a bit there. So when he starts charging $500 for those optimization guides is when you when things have headed in the wrong direction for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Just overclock your Intel processor and
Oh
do these
no.
specific tunings, and you'll be right to play the game. No, it
Uh,
does remind me of, we've talked about like AMD coming out and sort of saying pretty silly things about like 8 GB GPUs,
mhm,
Nvidia coming out and saying pretty silly things about like laptop GPUs and why they use certain memory types on desktop and laptop. You just don't have to say stuff
mhm,
like the performance is bad on PC, okay, but you don't have to like justify it or say anything. You just say nothing. Like, nothing is a fine thing to say. And I think a lot of the content that's been made about Borderlands 4 since its release has been around this very silly, dumb comments that the CEO has made about the
mhm,
PC performance. The topic would eventually die naturally if you don't speak about it. You just sort of say, "Oh yeah, the performance could be better. We're working on it, etc." Like, here's some settings that you might want to try, whatever. But to keep saying stuff over and over and over again in the
mm.
sort of modern media world is just a really bizarre choice.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, part of me understands him being defensive about, what could be his baby, or he's overseeing the project or whatever it may be, or he's just defending the people that he knows have put countless hours of, work into this product and they're really proud of it. So I can understand them creating this thing that they're proud of and they're excited to show everyone, and then it's not uh, as well received as they'd hoped, let's say. So I get that. I certainly can understand and sympathize with that aspect of it. But yeah, when that happens, maybe when you make one defensive tweet and it's very poorly received by the community, you sort of pull back and go, okay, I hear you guys. You know, we probably did focus a bit too much on high end hardware, and we'll have to try and do some more work to get it working better for you guys with the lower end hardware. We care about the gamers with all kinds of hardware. We just need a bit more time. We're working on it. So in the meantime, try and enjoy the game using the lower quality settings, but just know we're working on trying to make it better or something along those lines. I don't know. Obviously, the more ideal scenario is to do those optimizations in advance before releasing the game. Because I don't know what state Borderlands 4 will be in 6 to 12 months from now. Will it be like a cyberpunk type situation where the game gets very heavily optimized to the point where it runs impressively well on mid to low end hardware, or will it stay much the same? Because there's obviously a lot of issues like traversal stutter and stuff like that, which I probably didn't talk about enough in my initial benchmark video, just because there was so much else to focus on. And I guess when you're already saying the performance is, when you're saying the game is very unoptimized, it's a very poor state, there's a lot of performance related issues, that kind of covers that to a degree. And the traversal stutter isn't something that showed up that much in the benchmarks that I did for a few reasons. This is also a bit of a problem with benchmarking in general, because you're not just doing like what Daniel Owen would do or others, where it's that single playthrough. We're taking like an average of 3 runs. Generally, the things that create the stutter or whatever, like seeing a certain enemy for the first time or whatever, that's happened already in the run. So often with a lot of games that are particularly bad with this, and this has been a best practice for a long time, is to throw away the data from the initial run and then do an additional 3 runs and take that average, which can smooth out frame time performance. Now, that obviously has some issues of not really showing you how the game necessarily plays when you go through things for a first time. But the reason why it is a best practice and done that way is because you might have that traversal stutter or that poor 1% low performance show up for one graphics card, and then the next time you do it with another graphics card, it won't have done it because either it's built more of those shaders up or it just doesn't do it that time for whatever reason. But the reason won't necessarily be because of the product you're now using. So it leads to and you'll probably see this with some reviewers who, or not necessarily reviewers, but just people who post benchmark results who don't follow those best practices and will just run it once and then run it again. And you'll see these wild variances in 0.1% lows and even 1% lows that aren't really explainable and they can't explain. And it's just because you really do need that 3-run average to get those results more accurate, I would say, not necessarily representative of playing the game, but then it's difficult to do that because you'd probably have to benchmark, like the way we did Battlefield 6, for example, benchmark 2 different configurations in the same game at the same time, doing the exact same thing for an extended period of time. So anyway, hopefully that helps clear up some of those sort of issues with testing and why, you don't necessarily always see those poor results, because we've essentially done like a cached run and then do it again, which really helps with traversal stutter.
Yeah, and it really depends on the sorts of game as well. Like the actual way that you would play a game can differ. Like in some games, you do revisit things multiple times, in which case, you may run into the traversal stutter once, but then you revisit the area and you don't see it. Other games are much more sort of straight playthrough. Like there might not be open world, for example, and you're more just going along a line for most of the game. I think of a title like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which had a lot of traversal stutter issues. That game is more of sort of like you probably only see each area once, in which case the traversal stutter each time can be quite problematic. And some games do have trigger points as well. Like you can move between 2 areas and quite consistently see the stutter, but then other games don't work like that. So you may see a traversal stutter in that area once, but then reload or redo the whole thing, delete your shaders, and it doesn't happen in that exact spot again. So if you're trying to sort of build benchmark runs around the positions of traversal stutter, it's quite a challenge there. So it's just it's one of the things you kind of just have to mention, as if like, yes, this game has traversal stutter, and then everyone sort of knows, oh yeah, this may crop up randomly at whatever point, and it may depend on sort of the hardware and stuff that you've got.
Yeah, definitely. I think if the game performed really well but had traversal stutter, that's where I definitely would have mentioned it. And like I should have mentioned it anyway, but when you're already dunking on the performance of the game, you're saying it's bad. Like yeah, so anyway.
Yeah, and I think we've talked previously about optimization is always this sort of like difficult term that can often be misused. I don't think it's misused in the case of Borderlands 4, but has been misused for other games. And I think this comes down to, with this game, there's a lot of interesting things, especially when testing all of the settings, because this isn't a game that looks bad on, say, medium settings, for example. And there's lots of games these days where you can turn down the settings and the game still looks really good, like Alan Wake 2, for example, quite a difficult game to run, but if you turn it down to medium or even low settings, it still looks excellent and would be superior to a lot of games from, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. Cyberpunk 2077, its current state, you could be playing this on ray trace settings, but then you could turn it down to like medium and it still looks like a really high quality game. But then with Borderlands 4, in some ways you do gain performance, but then the performance you're still left with is unacceptable. So it's like the medium settings still run pretty badly. And then when you go below medium to sort of low preset type stuff, it starts nerfing all sorts of visual quality elements, in particular the grass density, which makes the game look really bad, in my opinion, like the low and very low settings for that look really bad. Anisotropic filtering gets cut, so basically the game just looks blurry, textures get cut, that sort of thing. So the game looks a lot worse, but then even then the performance isn't great.
And I've seen a lot of people complain about upscaling, which is,
Mm.
you and I are both pretty on board with upscaling at this point in time. We think DLSS and now FSR have gotten to a point where both technologies are very good. But, you have to credit DLSS for sort of leading the way there and eventually getting good.
Yeah.
And I think the problem we're seeing is gamers are probably going to be more accepting of a technology like DLSS upscaling in a game like Borderlands 4 if without DLSS you're getting what the gamer would already deem as acceptable performance. So let's say, you've got pretty mid-range hardware, you're running the high or very high settings, not necessarily the badass settings, but up there, like fairly high quality settings. You're getting around 90 FPS at 1440p, something like that, which is deemed an optimal, in my opinion, PC gaming experience. Game looks good, reasonable settings, all that sort of stuff. Then the advantage, or what DLSS or upscaling, FSR, whatever it is, has to offer is taking the game to that next level. So you've already got a good level. You enable it, and now you're looking at truly high refresh rate gaming. So, you're getting up there, your 120, 130, 140 frame rates where you can really start to utilize your high refresh rate monitor. And I think then people are much more accepting of it. But when it's like, oh, I'm getting 35 FPS and I enable, upscaling, and now I'm getting, what it might 50, 60, whatever it ended up being. And you're then at the bare minimum, I would say. And even then I would call that a suboptimal experience, especially if you've got a $400-500 GPU on a 1440p monitor or whatever. But you sort of get what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it's also like a slow, like all GPUs slowly degrade, if you know what I mean. Like they run games at a certain level when you buy them, and then over time games get more intensive. So over time, you might have been, when you bought the GPU, a native resolution gamer. And then over time, you're sort of like, oh, okay, I'd like a little bit more performance in this latest title. I'll enable DLSS. And I think people are very accepting of that. Like if you have an older GPU or a lower end GPU, you're probably going to have to rely more on these sorts of features, especially with newer titles, because the optimization points are usually somewhere in the mid-range, which is sort of the example that you were giving, where you'd be hoping that a mid-range GPU on sort of a standard setup like 1440p monitor, etc., without upscaling is giving you a good experience. So I think over time, yes, gamers are sort of getting accepted to and using DLSS. But if you go from sort of, oh, I've been playing all the games with DLSS enabled at let's say 100 FPS, then you get your brand new title and you're like, I'm going to do what I always do. I know that with my GPU, I'm usually playing on high settings with upscaling. Let me dial that into Borderlands 4. Oh, it's running at 60 FPS. Oh, like that's bad. Like that's not the usual experience that I've come to accept from my hardware. And that applies to all GPUs, right? Because the lower end gamer with entry level hardware is probably used to DLSS upscaling, maybe medium settings, 60 FPS. They play Borderlands 4, same settings. Now it's 40 FPS or whatever. And so it's always relative to like the games people have previously played. And so I think with a game like Borderlands 4, which looks good but isn't, like a leading game for visuals, it's not like an Alan Wake or a Cyberpunk with ray tracing, or even Indiana Jones with path tracing, where you turn on those settings, it runs like the frame rate is low, but at least you're like, oh, I can see that the game is sort of doing next gen visuals.
Yeah,
Borderlands 4 is not that game.
No, the frame rate becomes Borderlands 4 low, except Borderlands 4. Yeah, that's exactly it. But gamers don't want to have to utilize upscaling to get to their bare minimum acceptable levels of performance. Unless the game is just, like you say, next generation, looks unbelievable, which, as we've said multiple times now, as good as Borderlands 4 looks, it's not that. And then adding insult to injury is the other aspect of a technology like DLSS, which is frame generation.
Well, this is much worse, really.
Well, again, for me to even entertain enabling frame generation in a game like Borderlands 4, I'm probably going to want around 100 FPS because, like I said, 90 FPS is sort of my optimal minimum, however you want to frame that. And then you get the added latency or whatever of enabling frame generation. So let's just say 100 FPS I'm probably happy with enabling it at that point. Certainly 90 would be the absolute minimum. I'm not enabling frame generation at 60 FPS because I've played Borderlands 4 at 60 FPS. That's how I initially had to play. Well, it was lower than that with my 5090 at 4K, enabled upscaling, and I got it to around 60. And I struggled with aiming. It just felt bad.
Same. Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, I kept like oversteering, like overshooting my target, which because I normally aim at 200, 300 FPS. So jumping into this game that I'm not super familiar with and trying to aim at 60 was difficult. So then enabling frame generation to smooth that out doesn't help at all with the aiming problem.
Yeah,
so,
get rubber banding.
Yeah. So that's just, frame generation is not a solution there. And again, I'm not crapping on frame generation saying it's useless. I'm just saying it's not a technology I would use anyway because I'm not as interested in frame smoothing as I am improving latency. So that's just why it's not terribly appealing to me. But if I was going to use it, I would need at least 100 frames per second in a game like Borderlands 4 before I even entertained it.
Well, it's a first-person game, which is usually... And a first-person game you'd play with a keyboard and mouse, which is probably the worst type of game for frame generation. Like there are third-person games that you'd use a controller for where lower frame rates play better with frame gen. But Borderlands 4 is not that sort of game. It really needs a high FPS to give you that sort of nice playable experience. I think I could excuse a developer sort of saying like, we built this game with DLSS upscaling in mind, because with current development timeframes of games, DLSS was probably starting to get good around the time that a game like Borderlands 4 would have started development, and they would have sort of gone, okay, maybe most gamers are playing with upscaling enabled, and so we can target certain things, right? Like, so we want our mid-range gamers, they're probably going to enable DLSS. Here's an acceptable frame rate for them and so on. Now, that might not be acceptable to the gamer who's playing, and maybe they do want good experiences natively without enabling upscaling, but I could understand that. What I can't understand, though, is relying on frame generation as a crutch to get those performance targets.
Because it's not even a performance feature.
That's right. It's not a performance feature. So it's kind of like a developer drinking the Kool-Aid, the NVIDIA Kool-Aid of sort of like, frame gen does give you double the performance. It does make the 5070 a 4090 and all that sort of thing. It's misunderstanding what the feature does. And so if you're a developer who's sort of got performance targets in mind and you're sort of saying, okay, well, we need to get to, let's say, 60 FPS on entry-level GPUs at 1080p for our game to be a success. And then you're going, okay, well, that'll be with DLSS quality enabled. It'll be with frame generation enabled. And you're like, oh, okay, so 60 FPS, but with frame gen enabled, that experience is going to be really awful for the gamer. And that is something that has always concerned me about frame generation. And I think I mentioned it back in the original coverage of single frame generation when it came to the 40 series, was that if it's sort of being talked about as this performance enhancing feature, which is not really what it does, then that enables NVIDIA to sell graphics cards in a certain way, but it also enables developers to sort of cheat with optimization. And we've seen this there are some console games that their 60 FPS mode is 30 FPS plus frame generation, which is a bad experience. It should be, actual 60 FPS. And so I think a lot of gamers are sort of aware of this now. They know what frame generation is on PC and what it does. So I think good job, community, of sort of educating people on this sort of thing. But there is a world where game developers would probably have wanted to not put in any optimization work to their games and sort of just say, just use 4x frame gen to get 60 FPS or 120 FPS or whatever, because frame generation equals performance. But that's not a good experience. And so, it was, Randy Pitchford made some interesting comments in some of his, tweets, because people were saying things like Battlefield 6 runs really well. That's a game, like a first-person shooter game. Borderlands 4 maybe should have taken some lessons from that. And his sort of response to that was, were you comparing a competitive shooter, like player versus player, to a single player / player PvE sort of co-op game that's campaign driven, as sort of like the justification for why Borderlands 4 runs so much worse. But I think that's sort of misunderstanding what gamers want out of a title like Borderlands 4. Like, it is a relatively fast-paced game as far as single-player games go. It's a first-person shooter. It requires keyboard and mouse input. And so if you really knew what frame generation did, and you really knew what gamers would want out of sort of keyboard and mouse type inputs, first-person shooters and that sort of thing, you probably wouldn't be saying, yeah, 60 FPS with frame generation is the best. Like, that's the experience we wanted to deliver to gamers.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because for Borderlands 4 to be exciting, as far as I can tell, and I'm far from an expert of the game, but it seems like as you advance through the game, you upgrade and stuff, you kind of want to be running around, jumping, sliding, flick shotting, like diving for cover, diving out of cover, really maneuvering around the environment quite quickly to outmaneuver the enemy. It's not like a Counter-Strike type game where you're sort of peeking on a wall over and over again. I mean, that needs low latency for other reasons, but you know what I mean? It's not a very, let's say, static type shooter where
it's
you're
not
fixed
a cover
in a position.
shooter or
exactly, like a Splinter Cell or something like that. So anyway, it seems like a game where you would want to be able to make very accurate shots and move quickly. And yeah, I found it very disorientating, sort of doing those kind of flick shots, or when someone would run behind me and I sort of zoomed around, because you're at that low FPS, and I'm used to doing that at realistically like 300 frames per second, which people who aren't used to that sort of thing think that's crazy and you don't need those kind of frame rates, but it makes a massive difference when you're doing that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, when I first loaded up the game on the 5090, because I'm a YouTuber, so that's what you do, isn't it? What did you load it up on for the first time, Tim?
Oh yeah, it was a 5090.
Okay, good. Well, that's well established then. Yeah, I loaded up on a 5090 on a 9800X 3D, and I thought, 4K, child's play, whack that on, badass preset. Yeah, upscaling, don't need that. I got a 5090. Come on. I loaded into the game and I was legitimately looking at like 40 frames per second. I thought, has this got some sort of crazy anti-aliasing enabled or something? Or is it like...
It doesn't even have ray tracing.
Or
hardware accelerated ray tracing.
Well, that was
not in the game.
That was the other thing. I'm like, oh, okay, does this game have path tracing? I didn't think it did. Maybe I've got that enabled. And then I went through the menu, looked at every graphical option and thought, okay, there's nothing crazy here that should be absolutely punishing a 5090 this badly. And I thought, I must not have installed the game-ready drivers, or something went wrong with the driver installation. So I actually shut the game, because this is when the game was just released, so there wasn't really any performance reports that at least I'd seen, and I wasn't really looking around for them anyway. So I DDU'd the driver, installed the Borderlands 4 driver again, loaded back up, exact same performance. So then I started actually looking around. I think I found Daniel Owen got out a video really quickly, and I'm like, thank you, Daniel. That answers all my questions. I won't waste any more time trying to solve this performance-related problem that I thought I was having. This is unbelievably how the game runs on a 5090. And I actually ended up dropping down to 1440p. I found even with like balanced upscaling at 4K that the performance just wasn't good enough for me to actually play the game. So I dropped down to 1440p with, I think it might have even still been balanced or quality upscaling for the 100 and something FPS. And that was much better.
It's a fun game when it runs well enough. It's just that it doesn't run well enough often enough. I think with this title, they sort of made the developers, Gearbox Software, made some pretty bizarre choices, I guess. Now, I know that there's been interviews where they sort of tried to justify the use of things like nanite, and I sort of talked about that in my video a bit, but just overall, the style of the game cell shaded, that sort of cartoony sort of look, it kind of clashes with the let's make this a beautiful lighting, hyper like difficult to run sort of game because you're doing all these sorts of effects and stuff. It kind of clashes with the whole style that they're going with because and this is one of the issues I've always had with things like ray tracing, right? Is like you can't just add high quality lighting to a game that doesn't have the texture quality, the model quality, the sort of density of objects in the world to make it look real. Because if you add in these sort of realistic lighting effects, but the rest of the world doesn't look real, it still looks fake. And so you're still doing this sort of like pointless lighting stuff. There's a mismatch.
Just to pull you up on that, and this, I'm not speaking from experience at all when I say this. This is merely community feedback. I've heard from a lot of people that their favorite implementations for ray tracing that you actually, I think I might have even read these comments on like the state of ray tracing type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying the games where it's most impressive and you really need to check it out is like Minecraft and Quake, like the original game with ray tracing added. They reckon that's where it's like truly transformative and makes the game like so I don't know. That's not me saying that. I've just read a lot of comments of people saying like ray tracing in Minecraft is amazing. And
is that because of the difference though that you see in the game between like turning off? So you're sort of seeing the huge difference.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm sort of saying it's more, I don't know, maybe I'm sure we'll get comments on this podcast so we can sort of check out. Maybe I'm alone in this sort of thought, but I've always, I guess, thought that, the overall effects that you put into a game should match the overall level of visual quality that you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to do a really realistic game, so like lots of cool, realistic animations, trees blowing in the wind, sort of thinking about like the Last of Us style games or Horizon games or even like a Star Wars Outlaws sort of game, and you're going for that realistic look, then ray tracing in those sort of examples makes sense because you're building these worlds, you want to put realistic lighting into them. You've got, real-time day-night cycles, stuff like that. Ray tracing kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I hope I'm not cutting you off. I tend to agree, but at the same time, I think Borderlands 4 could do what they're trying to do. And another example would be Fortnite, right? Like now I play Fortnite on garbage tier performance mode, the most ugly graphics possible because that's actually the best way to play the game in a competitive setting. But if you turn, if you go to the DirectX 12 mode, turn on the epic quality presets, enable nanite, lumen, all that stuff, crank that up. The frame rate obviously is quite hideous, even on a 5090, much like we see in Borderlands 4. But honestly, the game looks phenomenal. Like, I know this is going to be a controversial hot take, but I honestly think it's one of the better looking games. Just because, like, I get the art style and everything, but it looks phenomenal. Like how good it looks. Looks really good. Like it's obviously different to an Alan Wake. Alan Wake's more like the realistic style, but in some ways, I think Fortnite looks more visually impressive. And I know that sounds absolutely insane to say that, but I don't know, just maxed out. I think that game looks insanely good.
It does look good, but I guess it's like if you turn down a game like Alan Wake to, let's say they had some sort of potato level settings, it really would destroy the overall look of the game. Like
it does in Fortnite though.
But the game is still sort of cartoony and is very playable on the garbage tier settings. Like,
but they all become like that. They all become flat and cartoony looking if you turn them down.
The game though is overall more cartoony though. So if you delete if you delete the textures in Fortnite, it's like, okay, you're sort of changing it a little bit.
It looks really bad.
Yeah, it looks bad, but that's the style of the game.
Yeah, but I used to play Fortnite on the lowest quality settings before the performance mode, which looked bad compared to the epic quality preset. And then they enabled the performance mode, which was like another level of bad. Like it was hideous. And I remember switching to it and just being like, nope, can't. This is a bridge too far. Like looks very bad. But then you see the pro gamers using it, and you do see the advantages and how it does make it easier to see through builds when they're destroyed, for example. And it does give you like quite a substantial like advantage in terms of like the delay to when you get to see like the character behind a wall. So much so that I ended up switching to it and I got used to it. And now it's just like, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know why we're talking about this.
I was just talking about it because of a game like Borderlands, you know, does it really need all these crazy, very expensive lighting effects and stuff when the overall game is designed to look sort of the cartoony, cel-shaded look? I guess my opinion, your opinion is a bit different with Fortnite, but my opinion with those sort of ray trace games, not that Borderlands uses ray tracing, but games that use expensive lighting effects, they work the best with games that have really detailed, high quality, realistic worlds because you're adding realistic effects to a world that is real. Whereas a game like Borderlands, it has a cartoon world, sort of, but you sort of know what I'm sort of saying. And then you're adding, it's like there's a mismatch there a bit between the level of detail and the expensive lighting effects. I don't
think that's the issue. I think you want the game to look as visually impressive, and I think Borderlands 4 does look good. You want it to look as amazing as possible. You want it to be as exciting and enjoyable to, you know, when you go through the world and you've got these huge render distances and amazing landscapes and lots of detail, that's awesome. Like, that's exciting to go into those environments and play the game in those environments. So I think you want that, but you want whatever that is that you get to be justified by the performance. So again, if Borderlands 4, I don't think the art style really matters. I think it had the art style it had, but whatever it was in your brain was telling you these were the best shadows and lighting and world details and environment you'd ever seen in gaming. And then you would it would be quite easy or easier for you to justify 40 FPS at 4K and a 5090. But you're not really getting that. You're like, I think Cyberpunk looks better. If you wanted to make that kind of comparison.
Yeah, but I think part of that is because of the art style and visual style that they've used. I think that the way that the game looks means that when you compare it to something like Cyberpunk and you see Cyberpunk, you're like, well, Cyberpunk looks better, but Cyberpunk uses quite realistic sort of style of visuals and has a very different, like, you know,
it plays way
density.
better.
But that's the thing, though, is that it does play better, but imagine a Borderlands where you remove the art style and you replace it with realistic sort of style elements in the game. Like, it's not cel shaded anymore. The lighting quality in the game is very good. Like the shadow quality, the amount of shadows, the draw distances, all those things are pretty up there. It's just, I think what people do is they look at the game, they're like, this kind of looks flat and sort of like not that impressive. And I think that's because of the style.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think at the end of the day, we're like, if we're saying it needs to be better optimized, so okay, in your opinion, can they achieve better performance on, say, the badass preset with the way the game looks on that preset? Can they achieve better performance? So if they have 6 to 12 months of optimization time, can the game perform better than that? Or is that just a result of using the technologies they're using?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like,
because if you're saying, well, you know, I expect there to be some performance patches released over whatever time period, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. If in 12 months' time you load up the game on your 9060 XT or 5060 Ti and it plays like 40% better, I'm just throwing a number out there, guys, 40% better than it does today while looking the same, then all of the things we're talking about weren't really the problem. It was just the problem that the game wasn't optimized. So
yeah, I mean, like, could they do that with the badass preset? I mean, I guess I'm looking at all the settings. There are some obvious settings that don't really do all that much visually that you could turn down. I think even on the medium set, or at least my optimized settings, which give you like 50% plus more performance, it's like, could they like that? Even that doesn't run that well. So I think, like, could that be optimized better? I think they've made some mistakes, I guess, in the way that they've designed the game from the start. So, you know, could they refactor the entire game to not use nanite to save performance? I don't think they're going to be able to do that. And it sounds like from at least interviews with other developers that nanite is a costly feature to enable.
Mhm.
And so I just don't think that was necessary for the visual style. I don't know whether they could change that. Things like the lighting quality, like, yeah, you could nerf like the lighting settings. I don't know whether that would improve the optimization of the game. You'd be reducing the visual quality in some ways, I guess. I'm not sure what they can do on that front. I mean, I guess part of it, like you looked at Borderlands 3 a bit in your video as well, is, does the game look significantly better than Borderlands 3? And Borderlands 3 runs a lot better. I think part of it is just like there's a limit to how good a game that has this style can look. And they've sort of done a lot of these sort of crazy lighting things, like the Badass preset is very expensive on hardware.
Mhm.
All those sorts of things, the amount of shadowing that they're doing in the game, all that sort of thing seems to be, and as well, Borderlands 4 moves to a proper open world as opposed to segmented open world, I guess, from previous games. All those things seem to have cost quite a lot of performance for not like I'm going to look into a bit more Borderlands 3 versus Borderlands 4 visuals to sort of really see how far they've come since then.
Mhm.
But I mean, you sort of did some testing, right? The performance cost is huge for what doesn't appear to be a
Yeah,
huge.
there's other things to take into consideration, like you said, like the actual world and how you access that. But that's again, that's difficult to compare as well because you have like loading screens or whatever. But when you do load in, is the experience then better? So if you
Mm.
gave gamers the option of having a load screen every now and then, or constant, or let's say very frequent and jarring traversal stutter. And I don't actually know how bad the traversal stutter is because I've only played it on a 9800X 3D with loads of high speed memory. Probably if you go to a slower CPU using maybe DDR4 memory or just a slower CPU in general, then the traversal stutter issue may become, significantly more noticeable. But yeah, if you gave gamers the option of having no load screens but frequent stuttering, or a lot less stuttering but load screens, which one would they pick? So,
Yeah, it's a difficult one. That's why, yeah, I think they'll have a hard time fixing, I guess, the performance of the game. Like often in other games, when they sort of say like we've improved performance or whatever, they do end up essentially just nerfing the visual quality. And they
mm,
just like they change what the ultra settings do or whatever to
mhm,
give you more performance. I guess there are times when like Cyberpunk, they do put in significant amounts of work because they're trying to get it working on certain consoles and stuff, and that can benefit PC gamers a bit.
mhm,
Part of it as well is a lot of people played that game once GPU hardware was better. But I think with Borderlands 4, yeah, like the changes that they've made compared to the previous game, how it works, some of the things that they're attempting to do is probably you're looking at like pretty significant reworking of the game. I think
mhm,
it really goes back to the developers at some point decided that the current performance of the game is what they were targeting. Like if you sort of look at the comments that Randy Pitchford has been making, it's not like he sort of said, we didn't expect this level of performance. It's kind of like, this is how the game works. We designed the game to work like this. And I think just those targets were wrong from the start. Like, maybe they were expecting better GPU hardware by now. The game's probably been in development for 5 or 6 years. That's probably a fair angle in some respects. But then the rest of it seems to be more like, yeah, we weren't really targeting high frame rates with this engine. We wanted the game to run at basically 60 FPS. We thought that was fine. And so we cranked everything up in the game that we possibly could. And now the result is the result that they've sort of gotten.
mhm.
So it kind of is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I'll be interested to hear from people in the comments whether, they sort of feel like, you know, extreme lighting quality can benefit sort of games like Borderlands 4 that don't go for an overly realistic style, because I think we did have a few differing opinions on that one. So it'd be interesting to see where people land on that one. Does Borderlands 4 need the lighting quality that they've implemented in the game, or do you think they would be able to get away with, for example, Borderlands 3 style lighting, which would have
Mhm.
potentially given them significantly more performance to work with? I'm not sure on that one. Probably needs a bit more looking into how the games look.
Yeah, it's doesn't seem to scale very well because, coming back to Fortnite, another Unreal Engine 5 game, you can disable things like Lumen and Nanite, but still use the epic quality settings and have the game still look very visually impressive. In a lot of scenes, the difference is next to nothing, but the performance change is significant.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was alluding to when I was talking back about Fortnite before, is that you can add in like not necessarily like from the very lowest settings to the very high settings. Obviously, there's a difference, but
scales massively.
The Fortnite style works well in terms of like you can turn off like a lumen feature, and the game still looks, like the lighting will change a little bit, but then you're sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, you're still getting sort of the style, the look that they wanted in the game. Whereas if you turn off, ray tracing in Alan Wake, it kind of significantly changes the style that they're going with, the realism of that game. But yeah, like I think scalability is definitely an issue, as you sort of said. The low settings, like I sort of point out in the optimization guide, some settings you can like nerf significantly, like grass quality to like nothing. Just deletes like most of the detail in at least the forested areas of the game. But then, yeah, you can't turn off lumen. Like that is a setting that's always enabled.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, there's not a setting that even just destroys the visual quality, but does so while significantly elevating FPS performance, which is what you can do in Fortnite.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the problem. Like you can play Borderlands 4 on, I did most of my testing on medium, which I think overall the medium preset is quite a significant downgrade, and the game looks not nearly as impressive. And although I certainly haven't done detailed comparisons, but Borderlands 3, which is, what did I say? It's like 6 years old or something now.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
it's old. So. It's much older. Using the top tier preset, the visual preset in that game, which is also labeled as Badass, I think that game on Badass looks better than Borderlands 4 on medium. Certainly better than Borderlands 4 on low. And again, I could be wrong about this. It definitely, I'm certain it looks much, much, much better than Borderlands 4 on low, which people might be like, well, yeah, that's not surprising. You're comparing one game on the max preset, one game on the lowest preset, even if there is quite a substantial age difference in the games. But the problem is Borderlands 3 on Badass plays at higher frame rates than Borderlands 4 with the medium preset.
Yeah, low isn't that much faster, really. It's like a little bit faster. I like the scaling of the game, like it isn't bad. Like in some other games, it wouldn't be bad because, if you see you can double the frame rate going from Badass to low. And in a lot of games, that's fine because the performance that you get on Ultra is fine. And so you double it to low and you're like, oh, that's really good now.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that they need to have scaled it more because of how badly the game runs to begin with. And so, and again, like an Alan Wake game, for example, low doesn't look that different to Ultra. And there are some, like Cyberpunk, low, it's not that bad. Like
Alan Wake plays at super low frame rates though, but you can get away with it in that game.
Yeah, you can. It's the style. It comes down to the style of the game, like the gameplay. The visual style is going for more realism, so people are probably going to be a little bit more accepting of the performance. And even then, like the low settings don't perform that badly. Like the low settings do enable quite a lot of mainstream sort of affordable GPUs to at least play the game at frame rates which are fine for playing Alan Wake. Whereas you can't say the same about Borderlands, where a lot of older graphics cards, you sort of like sub 60 FPS with upscaling at low settings. So I think that's a problem. And of course, we've talked a lot about, there's always this difficulty with games where, everyone likes to just turn things up to Ultra when Ultra may be designed for higher end GPUs. And so there's always that sort of like, don't be afraid to turn things down to high or medium. You still might be getting a good looking game. I think the problem with Borderlands on that front is, firstly, medium still doesn't run well enough, so you're not getting enough benefit from switching it down. And if you go below that, the game looks like crap. And then they've sort of got this like Badass, very high sort of thing going on. There's no actual Ultra. So it's like, is Badass meant to be the Ultra setting that's sort of like the default, or is it a setting that's only for people with high-end GPUs? Maybe they would have been better off by like deleting the badass preset and having those settings being like something that you have to manually enable though, like every single setting, so that very high may turn all the settings up to high, but then you can manually go down and turn everything up to very high or extreme or something. There's kind of that like naming battle with PC gaming. Like, make sure that the first out of the box experience for people when they turn things up isn't bad. But then if you do own a 5090, you can crank things up even further manually. And so we've seen that with like extreme presets. I think with like Star Wars Outlaws and Avatar, you could put in like a console command that unlocks an extra preset for people with super high-end graphics cards. I think that would have been maybe a better strategy for this, along with scaling the game better, along with improving the overall performance, along with thinking like there's a lot of things that they could have done here to sort of, just improve the way the game runs. But yeah, I think it kind of is the way it is, because I remember Borderlands 3 running badly at launch. And was that game ever fixed, or was it just a case that hardware got faster and so the game ran better?
I actually don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that one. You'd have to go back and try and work that out.
Yeah, we have to look at performance at launch, right, versus performance now.
Well, yeah, and just see if there was reports or if someone, did updated patch testing or whatever. I'm not sure. I didn't do too much Borderlands 3 testing. It was kind of a game we looked at and then we included in more like the 50 game benchmarks on occasion, but not a whole lot. So yeah, I'll follow the Borderlands 4 development much more closely than I did with Borderlands 3.
Yep, will certainly be interesting to track that one, see how they go with sort of these updates and things, and whether that does end up nerfing visuals, whether they can genuinely optimize the game and make it run a bit better. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate because, as I sort of said in my optimization video, it genuinely seems like an enjoyable game, more enjoyable than Borderlands 3. I've played all the Borderlands games so far. I think maybe not the Tales of Borderlands, whatever it was called, but the other ones, I played the main ones. Seems like a high quality game. I just want to enjoy it at the levels of performance that a game like this really should be delivering. And so that's just a little bit disappointing that the game is not as enjoyable from the like latency, smoothness, that sort of style, that sort of side of things. So yeah, is there anything else more to talk about with Borderlands 4? I'm not sure whether we'll have too much more content on the game coming out on the channel, but
I haven't got anything planned. No, I don't have anything else for you.
Cool. Let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about our boring lives. Okay, Steve, last week I talked about my holiday and then I said basically there's nothing else exciting happening in my life since that point, and that's still true now. So you apparently had a whole bunch of stories ready to go in the chamber, so fire some of those off.
Yeah, I might have overplayed my hand on that one. So while you were away, I had I've got a silly story I'll tell you, because I didn't tell you the story about how I ripped my lip off, did I?
No. What?
Okay, good. I'll before I get to that. So yeah, Jared came over because he wanted to do some laptop VRAM testing. The memory.
I watched that
thing.
video on his channel. Good video.
Yep. Good. Basically, a few different content creators had looked at sort of VRAM testing on laptops, but weren't able to quite get the hardware to match up correctly, or they were testing games like Counter-Strike, for example. So Jared, and he had mixed opinions on how much the VRAM thing would matter for laptops, with laptop GPUs being less powerful than desktop GPUs and so on and so forth. So he thought, how about I just come and visit you, you show me how you do the testing, and then I'll work out whether or not I think it's a problem for laptops. I said, sure, that sounds like fun. Come over. And so I think Jared stayed 3 or 4 days. Anyway, he got here on Sunday night, so we just chatted, relaxed, and then Monday we got into it. I just basically games like Indiana Jones, Jared hadn't even played before. So there's a lot of games I had like that where he hadn't really experienced them before. So we had a 16 gigabyte GPU, and then we had an 8 gigabyte GPU, obviously in the laptop. Watch that video if you want the details. But essentially it opened up Jared's eyes and he was like, wow, I can't believe how bad the 8 gigabyte card is. Like, there's so many situations that are highly playable on the 16 gigabyte variant that aren't on the 8, and we're able to demonstrate that very clearly now. So and he was saying, previously he thought it was less of an issue for laptops because they were less powerful and therefore you wouldn't be using those higher quality settings. But after he saw, I kept showing, I go, there's more. He's like, well, we've probably got enough here. And I'm like, I'll show you one more. And we'd load up another game and I'd show him how easily it was to break it under, what would be very playable conditions. And then, how what sort of visual downgrades you need to make in order for it to work. And the more he saw of that, he's like, you know what? I think this is actually probably a bigger problem for laptop than it is for desktop, because you're making such a larger, a much more significant investment in the laptop, and you can't just simply upgrade the GPU. Whereas at least if you get stung buying a $300 to $400 8GB GPU or graphics card on the desktop,
yes,
if you realize your mistake 1 or 2 years down the track and it becomes a huge problem for you, if you're not predominantly playing Fortnite, Apex Legends, and Counter-Strike or whatever, you can then just spend hopefully $400-ish again and buy your way out of that problem. But with a laptop, you're looking at like $3,000, $4,000. It's probably talking Australian dollars, but I honestly have no idea. So yeah, he then became quite concerned about it, but he's like, the problem is you have to spend thousands of dollars more just to get a 12 gigabyte variant. Like I think it's a 5070 Ti on laptops are 12 gigabytes and the 5070s 8.
Real bad.
So anyway, we had a lot. We had a lot of fun. I enjoyed showing him all the testing that I'd done previously and all the things I'd learnt through all my testing over the years of looking into this. So I was able to show him and sort of opened his eyes to the problem. And yeah, he's really changed his opinion on that, which is fine. If he was still of the opinion that he doesn't think it's a big deal on laptops, I would have been fine with, it's up to him to work out what he thinks. So I wasn't telling him he had to come to one conclusion or the other. I just showed him. And he was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was this bad. So anyway, that was good. And yeah, I think based on what I saw on Reddit and other places, they seemed really happy with his video and his conclusions and the testing that he showed. So that was cool. And yeah, we had a good time basically. Yeah, we get Tim and I, well, you and I both get along really well with Jared, and so does Bale. And he lives in a different state to us. It's about a 7-hour drive, which is why we don't catch up that often. Don't often do those 14-hour round trips to catch up. But we usually see each other at trade shows, places like Computex. But Jared's come out here. That was his second time now. So it is. Hopefully, we can make it like a yearly thing where he can come. We can do some sort of collaborative effort. And this time it was for his channel, which was really good. But yeah, Balin gets on well with him, and Jared's gotten big into the gym stuff. He's been doing that for a little while now, and obviously Balin's massively into that, and I'm trying to be less of a lazy bum, so I'm starting to do it a bit. So it was kind of fun. All three of us worked out each day at the time Jared usually works at, which is around 2-3 o'clock. So we did that for like an hour and a half, and it was actually a lot of fun. So yeah, all serious as you could imagine. No funny business there, Tim. So it was all very serious gym stuff. And yeah, that was really good. So I have a protein powder that I've been using since Balin got me onto it, which is you guys are going to want the details. I actually forget what it is, but it's like I think it's called the Gold Standard or something. I don't know. It's a protein powder. It tastes quite good. That's why Balin got me onto it, because he uses it. Anyway, Jared comes over and Jared's like, oh, you've got to try this protein powder that I've got. It's the best. And Balin's like, nah. Balin's having none of it. He's like, I've tried heaps of them. Anyway, it's a Amino Z is the one that Jared had. So I tried it. Tasted really good. It was really, really good. Really liked it. So he brought down a packet. It had like half of it still in there. It was like a vanilla flavor. So Jared graciously left that for Balin and I until we got our own. So I jumped online, ordered like half a dozen different flavors. They're all good, by the way.
Okay,
actually, that's
interesting.
I ordered like a dozen, I think. So I got a heap of them, and because I ordered so much, this is a weird story, Tim, but it's one of my stories.
Sure.
So I ordered like a dozen of them, and they hand wrote this little card, Okay. And I told Jared I got my order. So Jared said, get a photo and show me what you got. So I got them all out of the boxes and I've chucked them on the gym floor. Such a dumb story. I've put them on the floor and I've got this card they've given me. It's like probably twice the size of a business card, like one of the little...
like a little note card.
Yeah, like a postal note thing. What do they call those? A postcard? Or is
postcard.
that what postcard, yeah. Like one of those with their branding on the back. It was like, a couple of lines to write a nice message. They wrote me like a nice little message using one of those. What are they called? A pen? One of those things.
A pen, yes. I believe that's right.
I believe that's correct. It's like a, what do you call it? Like a manual printer.
Yes.
So they did that. They wrote me a nice little letter and I was going to show that to Jared in the photo. So I did what you normally do, right? Here's a packet here of something random. I had it in my hand and I've set them all up. And as I'm setting them up, I've done this.
Yes, you've put for people on the podcast, you've put
just
the packet in your mouth. Yeah.
Just on, you've done this before, right? This is a normal thing that humans have done when their hands are full.
Yeah, you put the card in your mouth to store it for a little bit. Yeah,
this is what I've done, right?
Yeah, normal.
So you're with me so far.
Yep.
I've set them up. I've got my phone in my hand, and with my left hand, I've grabbed the note and pulled it out of my mouth just normally. Just pulled it out of my mouth and held it in front of my phone. And as I did it, I was like, why the bloody hell is my mouth stinging? And I look at, sorry if this is a bit gross for people, I look at the card and my lips are on the card.
Like skin.
Like there's like a slightly, like it's translucent, but it's like a orangey kind of color. Yeah, the skin of my lips, like it looked like jelly was on the card.
What was this card made out of?
It was like a waxy, I don't know.
It was just glue on the outside or something that just reacted with your lips immediately and just like dissolved them.
I don't know. I've never experienced it, never experienced anything like it before. Like, I'm always doing construction and that, and I'm putting pencils in my mouth or bits of paper that we've jotted. I've never, in my 42 years of life, this has never happened to me. Anyway, I'm standing there a bit stunned, like, what is happening here? And it stung pretty bad. So I've walked out of the gym into the studio and I could feel like liquid on my face. And I've looked over at Balin and I'm like, is my face bleeding? And Balin has just jumped at me. She was like, holy shit, what happened to you? He's freaking out because by this stage there's blood because it ripped my bottom lip and my top lip clean off. And there's blood all down my chin, all in my teeth, all in my mouth. It's just dripping off my face. Like it looked pretty bad. I took a photo, but I won't share that. And yeah, I actually told this on the Patreon live stream shortly after it happened. So anyway, I just had to get some tissues and kind of stick them to my face to stop the bleeding. It wasn't like, it wasn't like horrific or anything, but it wasn't great. And then I just had to, well, the funny thing was, I think my wife made the joke that it was like a planned thing by Amino Z because then all I could have was like protein shakes through a straw for 2 days because it was so bad because my lips would dry out really quickly, but then licking them was like pulling open a wound. Like it just stung so bad. So it was very uncomfortable for 2 days. It was a minor inconvenience in reality. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was pretty annoying. I don't know. Anyway, that was just random after the third day, it was just tender, but it was, I could eat again. And by the fourth day, it was fine. So
I just how does something like that even happen?
I don't know. You should have seen the look on Balin's face. He's like, did you punch yourself in the face with a dumbbell? Like, what have you done? I'm like, yeah, I put like a postcard in my mouth and then just Like I didn't yank it out or anything. I just grabbed it and just pulled it as you would. And yeah, apparently it's easy to do. I've never done it before. I haven't really heard of anyone ever doing it before. I'm just special like that, Tim.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
I don't know what to tell you. So that was a thing that I did. Thanks, Jared.
So you bought a whole bunch of protein powders,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So did you buy like all the different flavors being like huge bags? Because I've bought like the
they're 1
tasting packs
kilo.
before. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
they're-
quite a lot. Yeah.
Well, the ones I was getting previously were 4.5 kilogram bags, and they take multiple months. Like I'm not exactly sure, 3 or 4 months to go through. Whereas the 1 kilogram bags, yeah, obviously you can probably, if you had that every day for a month, you know, that would be that. But it's not just for me. Like I share it with Balin as well, so he's welcome to you know, use my protein powder when he works out in the gym here. He does bring his own as well, but the vanilla flavor was great. They had, I don't know, I want to say 20 different flavors. So I bought about a dozen of them, and I've tried all of them, and they're all amazing, really good.
Yeah, so I'd be always worried with that because whenever I've tried like a bunch of different flavors, I reckon about 90% of them are very bad.
Yes, well, the ones that I was using, I would say 60% of them were good.
Okay, good strike rate.
So I was pretty happy with that. And then Jared said he's tried a few different flavors himself. I think he'd tried about 4, so he was a bit more reserved like you, but you know me. Like I'm just, it's all or nothing. And he said all 4 were phenomenally good. Like he loved all 4 of them, but he was reluctant to try other ones because, you know, he's sort of had a similar experience to you. I was like, nah, I'll just, because Balin, he's a protein dumpster. So he just said, if there's any you buy that you absolutely hate, I'll just have them anyway. So, you know, I was like, well, it's not going to be poured down the sink or in the rubbish bin or whatever. It'll just go into Balin.
So do you add it into anything, or you're just like the straight protein powder plus water? So just normal?
So you can have them in a shaker with water, and most of them are actually really good. I usually have like a smoothie for lunch every day.
Yeah, that's how I usually do it.
Yeah, so just 2 scoops in the smoothie cup, and then I usually put like some banana or strawberries or both and some other fruits in there, and then just a bit of light milk, and it's awesome. And the Amino Z ones are amazing because the ones that I was using, I don't know exactly what the name is. It tasted good, but it was very thick, like very thick. Whereas the Amino Z stuff's quite smooth.
Yeah, I always have a problem with the protein powders because, and I'm sure that people have just switched off now because we're talking about protein powders. Because I am mildly lactose intolerant, and a lot of protein comes from like whey protein, which for people who are lactose intolerant can trigger you a little bit. So I always have the issue with some of like, it depends on the type of protein powder, but some of the whey-based ones agree with me and some don't. But also the plant-based ones are usually fine. But the problem with the plant-based ones is that they all taste bad. Every single one awful. And so that's always been the problem for me, is trying to find ones that don't taste bad, agree with me, and that's it really. Just the good tastes. And so some of them, I usually just try to stick with like sometimes unflavored ones. I find are all right. And then like just like your vanillas and that sort of thing.
Well, you'll have to, when you come over.
I'll try it.
When you come over, you'll be here next week. So
yeah.
I'll test the card out as well. See how that goes on your lips.
I think I'll pass on the lip destroyer for now. I need my lips for I don't know, making videos.
Yeah, when it comes to this stuff, I'm fortunate that I can, with food in general, I can eat anything. As we proved in Taiwan all those years ago when we did the Mega Mix challenge.
Yeah, that was bad for me.
I won't bring that. Didn't mean to bring those memories up for you, Tim. For those listening to me having no idea what I'm talking about, I was using and still like the gold standard by Optimum Nutrition. So gold standard 100% whey by Optimum Nutrition is what Balin put me onto. And it's quite good. It tastes good. But it is, I found in the smoothies very thick compared to the Amino Z stuff. So that's, and the Amino Z just has probably a better range of different flavors. They've all been good. Because I think I tried like the cookies and cream one from Optimum Nutrition and didn't love that, but their double choc one was good. The vanilla ice one was good. I think the French vanilla cream was good. But anyway, I don't know. It's if you want to talk more about this stuff, we'll get Balin back on or something. You can do a podcast with him and talk about this stuff forever.
I'll figure it out. But yeah, I don't mind a smoothie. So always after, the best options. Maybe I'll try some of these ones, see how they go.
Yeah. Well, Jared was right. So other than Jared visiting and then getting me onto a nice protein where I destroyed my lip, Starlink went down last Wednesday, actually. So
okay.
Since I've had the service, it apparently has gone down. That there's been global outages, but they've happened at, I suppose, like 3 a.m. here in Australia. So I've never got to experience a Starlink outage. So that happened for me Wednesday morning, my first one after 4 years, I think it is, something like that. It lasted about 2 hours. So
not great, but
yeah, well, it was really, really devastating for me, Tim, because I have a lot of my smart home stuff, like my ACs and that, going through Starlink because it's more reliable than my NBN. So I woke up in the morning, I've opened my phone up from my bed, and I wasn't able to turn the heater on in the studio.
Oh no!
I know, because normally I do that like 10 minutes before I get in, so it's nice and warm by the time I get in here. So how rough is that? I had to walk in here.
So rough.
I had to find the white remote. You know how people used to use those to turn on
infrared, good technology.
Yeah, I'd use the IR. Yep, and I had to turn it on that way and then wait for the room to heat up. So that was, Starlink did ruin my day that day. Thankfully, it came back for the next day, so I could turn the heater on from bed. But yeah, it's rough out here, guys. It's real rough.
Well, Starlink, so far has been pretty good for you, though. So I guess you can't really complain too much.
Well, Starlink has been amazing in multiple different ways. First of all the ways I've listed to date, like it's reliable. When the power goes out, I still have internet. Because if we lose power for more than 3 hours here, the UPS at our exchange goes down and you lose landlines and everything. I live very rural, but that's still embarrassing. But it's a thing that happens.
They took up your diesel generator to the local exchange.
I could, and that would solve the problem for the entire community. Maybe I'll Harbour and Box could donate one, but then I'd have to man it and go up there and fill it up with fuel and stuff. And I think that Telstra should probably do that. But anyway, but one of the reasons more recently that why it's been good is because it's forced the local NBN to pull their finger out. Previously, our wireless NBN topped out at about, I want to say like 150, 200 megabits per second. It was pretty bad, very bad. And the upload speed was like 4 megabits per second. So I just couldn't use it. Just couldn't use it for uploading anything. And using the same or similar technology, my mobile phone was like 6 times faster. But because a lot of locals, a lot of people, I guess in not just rural Victoria, but probably Australia-wide, have started switching to Starlink because it's not that much more expensive and it just works and it's unbelievably fast. So that being the case, they've obviously been a bit worried at NBN that, a lot of people are switching to Starlink and they can't compete with that. Well, they weren't competing with that. So now my wireless NBN is about 4-5 times faster than it was, for about $20 more. So, and it's actually genuinely fast all the time now. So, during peak hour, whatever, I'm getting like 550 megabits per second, which
that's pretty good
for wireless NBN is blistering fast.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
So it's, and I get like reliably 40 up, which, yeah, it's 40 up.
For most people, that'd be usable though.
Well, we can upload videos on that and it's not absurdly long. And I mean, that's similar to Starlink, to be fair. It's my unlimited 5G that is faster than that. That's about 80 up. So it's about double. But anyway, it's gotten a lot better, and it's gotten I attribute that solely to the competition brought about by Starlink. Yep. Because when I first got Starlink, basically nobody else had it in like the local area. And people started asking me about it. And then a lot of the local businesses started getting it. And then a lot of the locals started getting it. And a lot of people were hesitant to get it because of the initial, obviously the cost of the hardware was like $700. And then you had to pay about $140 a month, which is not that far off double the NBN. But the problem is the NBN just didn't work for a lot of these people, like at all. So they really didn't have much choice. So anyway, once you pay a lot of money for a thing and it actually works and it's reliable over a long period of time, you just get to the point where you're happy paying the money for it. And even if a sort of cheaper alternative comes along, you're not as, let's say, willing to just jump over and change because it's a bit of an unknown. And the thing you've had for 4 years, if it's worked pretty much flawlessly in that period of time, you're happy to pay the money for a service that works and lets you do what you want to do. So anyway, thanks for sponsoring this podcast, Starlink and Amino Z. Appreciate it.
We have done a Starlink ad before, so
on Hardware Unboxed.
So they have been a channel sponsor at one point.
Yes.
Get back on Starlink.
I was using the service for about 2 years before they were a sponsor, though.
True.
So I didn't use it because they were a sponsor.
No, that's right. But we advertise stuff that we believe in, and Starlink's a good product, so it makes sense. Well, I think that pretty much will wrap up this podcast episode, considering how long we've been going for at this point. So thanks to everyone that's listened right to the end of this podcast. As Steve mentioned, I'll be heading over to his place for the Q&A series pretty soon. So next week we will have a monthly live stream, which will be available for Patreon members. So if you're a Patreon member, stay tuned for that. If you're not a Patreon member, you can always sign up if you want to join into our live streams and all the other cool benefits that you get when you're a Patreon member, like ad-free versions of this podcast, among other things. So there's that. Outside of that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.